Who were the extremely powerful warriors, the twins, that humiliated both the Jedi and the Sith? Greetings Acolytes, and welcome back to the Archives. Believe it or not, there was actually a time during the Great Galactic War when the Republic and the Sith Empire only had to worry about one another. But at some point, a third faction would make themselves known during a series of raids on both sides of the war. This was the Eternal Empire, led by the twin princes of Emperor Valkorion, by the names of Aran and Thexan. As we know them, they would make enemies from the light and the dark as they took them all by storm, and as a result, we would get the most compelling story of twins in all of Star Wars by far. But who exactly were the Eternal Twins? How were they so powerful? Powerful enough to cut down anyone who stood in their way, Jedi or Sith alike? And why did Aran end up killing his own brother? Well, join us today as we open up an Eternal Holocron to seek the answers and more. Aran and Thexan were born from Valkorion and Senya Tyrell. They were together from the moment of birth through childhood and on into adulthood. The two boys were inseparable, often getting into mischief such as switching clothes and pretending to be the other one to confuse servants. They would often play together in the Eternal Swamp, and also began their training together, maintaining a very close bond. But this did not please their father. In our Valen holocron, we described how the boys were born prior to Vitiate's spirit fully entering the body of Valkorion, a former warrior that Darth Vitiate now possessed. This means that while the twins inherited their father's genetic potential, they did not receive the full spiritual potential of Vitiate's grandiose power. They were only partial sons of the Emperor and one Sith pureblood. The full inheritance of his power had gone to their younger sister Valen, and because of this, the twins did not turn out anywhere near as powerful as Valkorion had hoped, which is when he became cold and cruel to them. Their mother Senya, however, loved the two boys dearly and did what she could to raise them as wise princes of Zakuul. Tragically though, the boys did not return their mother's affection. Instead, they did everything they could to curry favor of their father, something that they would never get because they could not give him the only thing he wanted: rivalry. Valkorion had always wanted the boys to be bitter rivals with one another, so that they could grow stronger by competing, an endless source of motivation to grow stronger and stronger in the Force. And yet, unfortunately for their father, the boys had formed an unbreakable bond, or at least on the surface it seemed unbreakable. The twins' closeness and nigh dependence on one another kept them from growing to the level that Valkorion had always desired. He wanted weapons, not sons. And because of this, he decided to neglect them, to pay them little mind. As the boys grew, their bond remained. But a clear difference was becoming prevalent. Namely, Thexan was always more capable of the two of them. He was stronger, he was more level-headed, quiet, and extremely tough. Thexan excelled in his training and became the sweetheart of the Imperial public. He was a formidable warrior, and he was loved, primed to be the next emperor. While he still neglected his mother, he cared more for his family than Aran ever did. When Valkorion took Senya to Nathema to experiment on her, Thexan would be her only regular visitor, bringing her company and gifts from worlds that they were conquering. He would also be the one to placate to his brother Aran whenever Valkorion gave him the cold shoulder. But Aran, on the other hand, was not stable. Due to his lack of progression in comparison to his brother, Aran was short-tempered and grew increasingly more obsessed with receiving his father's affection and approval, a path that only led to more and more resentment as the years went on. Throughout all of this, their mother faded into the background as they seemingly left her behind emotionally. Finally, the day came for the Eternal Empire to reveal itself in full to the galaxy, which Valkorion had planned to do with a series of raids on the Jedi and Sith core worlds alike, sending a clear message that there was a new power in the galaxy. The twins knelt before their father and asked for permission to lead the charge. Valkorion, though, was still unhappy with their progress, but at least accepted Thexan's strength. He also saw this as an opportunity to pit the boys against each other in open combat, sowing jealousy that he hoped one day would blossom into strength. The Emperor had commanded that Thexan should lead the charge, and that Aran should remain home on Zakuul. Enraged by this decree, Aran would defy his father and go with Thexan anyway. His twin brother would not stop him, as he always wanted his other half by his side. The two warriors then set out with the Knights of Zakuul to bring a wave of destruction upon the galaxy. Despite what Valkorion believed, the twin sons of Zakuul were a force to be reckoned with. Their training with the Knights growing up paid off, as they could not be defeated in single combat by any Jedi or Sith that they came across. Even Aran, the less accomplished of the twins, was ruthless, never planning to lose. The twins would attack the Republic factory on the world of Balmorra, where they squashed any Jedi resistance. They continued this attack on many fronts, driving back both the Republic and the Sith Empire, which were caught completely off guard by a brand new foe entering the fray. And yet, throughout all of this, Valkorion continued to ignore and to even turn his back on his sons. None of their victories were good enough for him, because the victory he desired did not lie on any battlefield, but within their hearts. The continued neglect would begin to wear on Aran, as he began to fight with a bloodlust and a fury that Thexan had never seen before, and it scared him. Aran would unleash his fury on the front lines. This wasn't until their attack of the Sith world of Korriban, where the twins would meet the Sith army under the control of a lady of the Sith by the name of Dartha Troxa. During this battle, Aran would extend himself too far and would receive a grave injury. Aran would lose his entire left arm and severe scarring on the side of his face. Aran needed a cybernetic prosthetic and a half mask in order to cover up the injury. Instead of weakening him though, this wound only served to make Aran stronger. There was a change in his demeanor as the young Prince Aran would pass away with his injuries, and a dragon was born. A ruthless creature, more ruthless, more brutal than he had ever been before, starting to fully draw on the dark side for the first time in his life. Thexan noticed the change in his brother, but had no idea the levels that he had fallen, and had no idea how to console him. Upon their return to Zakuul, the two princes knelt before their father and presented him with their prizes, the lightsabers of the Jedi and Sith leaders, as trophies, proof of their successful conquest. But Valkorion turned away from them for the last time. The disappointment was too much, and Aran had had enough. Looking down at his cybernetic arm and realizing just how much he had sacrificed for the love of his father, a love he would never get, Aran snapped. Falling to the dark side, Aran had one thought: kill. He leapt at his father to take off his head with one swing, but Thexan intervened, using the Force to pull his brother away from the attempted patricide. As soon as this occurred, you can see the very subtle smile on Valkorion's face, as he knows now that he has won. In his blind rage, Aran's fury turns on his brother, resulting in a very brief duel that ends with Aran slashing Thexan across the stomach. As the twins' life extinguishes, Aran comes back to his senses long enough to realize what he has done, and to cradle his dying brother. In the shadows, Vaylin watched the entire thing unfold in secret, finally getting what he always wanted. Valkorion now acknowledged Aran as his son, and extended the favor that he had always withheld. But it was too late. Aran would never forgive, and he would never forget. Whenever the Emperor captured the Outlander and his back was turned, Aran would run him through with his lightsaber as the opportunity finally presented itself. He had always hated his father, and that would fester within him eternally. Aran would seize the eternal throne of the Empire, and Vaylin would acknowledge his supremacy, choosing to ally herself with him. Thexan would have a funeral on Zakuul, but none of the public, not even their mother Senya, would ever know how he truly died. Publicly, Thexan had sacrificed himself for the Empire during the Core World raids. Senya at this point was on the run from her whole family, as they had completely turned on her and become something else entirely: true dragons. She wouldn't learn about the true nature of Thexan's death until Vaylin would reveal it to her 5 years later. But the Zakuul citizenship constantly talk about how they wished that Thexan had taken the throne instead of Aran, as he was always the stronger and more level-headed of the two, more capable of ruling. They felt entirely shortchanged. Aran would only end up ruling Zakuul for around 5 years before he too was betrayed by Vaylin, who herself would take the throne, becoming Zakuul's first empress. After being cast aside, Aran would finally reconnect with Senya, and the two would form a bond that they never formed when he was a child. Aran would ultimately decide to join the Outlander and the Alliance to fight back against Vaylin, and in the end, Thexan's spirit would return amongst the crowd of all of those that Vitiate had wronged, his own son. In the moment of the Emperor's death, Aran and Thexan joined the rest as they combined their power to banish the Dark Lord from existence, realizing post-mortem that Valkorion was never their father and was only ever a monster. And thus ended the story of the Princes of Zakuul. the sons of the most evil man in galactic history. Aran and Thexan are surprisingly complex and beautiful characters. Their story is so unique, which starts out pretty standard as it goes, but eventually, it transforms into a wildly different story. In most twin stories, it's always one versus the other, but in this case their bond was the problem, and their rivalry lasted only seconds, resulting in a decision that Aran would regret for the rest of his life. They were both victims of Valkorian's cruelty and lust for power, his inability to break from the philosophy of the Sith, his inability to stop the infighting, something that he himself claimed that he had risen above. It was his foundation and the hold on the dark side that it would always have on Valkorian that was his ultimate downfall, his inability to make something truly good, even when he had the opportunity. The story of the princes of Zakul is profoundly tragic, tunnel-visioned into gaining the love and acceptance from a creature who is incapable of feeling such things. When it comes to their alignment in the Force though, the princes weren't exactly light side wielders, but something more in the middle, which follows in line with the philosophy carried by the Knights of Zakul. They used whatever parts of the Force were convenient for them and carried them to their goals, believing in justice above all else, but the justice of the Eternal Empire, not for the Republic or the light or dark side. Valkorian wanted the twins though to embrace the dark side so that they could boost their power and become weapons. Despite being the sons of a vile Sith Lord, the dark side was actually presented as a problem in their lives. The problem is, so long as one lived, the other would never be able to completely succumb to the dark. But it turned out that the family love still existed in their mother Senya, which ultimately defeated the darkness inside Aran, a darkness that resulted in him slaying his brother earlier. The only person that he originally believed ever loved him, his brother, he murdered because of his father. It's an operatic tragedy fitting of a galaxy far, far away, and a story that we were very excited to share with you in our archives today. But now, what are your thoughts on this? What were your thoughts when you first saw the twins in the Old Republic trailer titled Sacrifice? And have you been wondering what the story behind the twins truly was? As always, my friends, thank you so much for visiting the channel and the archives today. Your support means the world to me, and as always, I hope that you're having a phenomenal day.